What's up, y'all? This is Will Linger with VTI Consulting. Hey, today we're going to talk about 9 weeks to building better business finances. This is a real practical guide for those of you who are agency owners or operators who are somewhere between $0 top line revenue and $1 million. We're going to hit a lot of different topics today. Again, I want you to know that this is a cursory overview of those topics, and my plan is to go deeper into each one of the areas that we're going to talk about today as time goes on. But again, this is rough framework for how to do this. And also, I'm going to present this information from a micro to macro perspective. Um, I'm a person who naturally thinks macro to micro, right? So I think big picture and I go all the way down into the details. Some of y'all like, give me the details up front and let that build out the bigger picture. So again, today we're going to start micro and then build out to more of the macro perspective. Here's our agenda for today. These are the topics we're going to be hitting on. So everything from bookkeeping to financial planning and analysis, forecasting, decision making, and building scale. Why am I doing this? VTI is a consulting firm that helps creative agencies become more profitable, so that you run those businesses, you're more carefree. The work that I've done in the past, what I've come to understand that is especially for creatives, um, it's very hard to do what you all do so well under duress. And to me, money and finances is really simply a math problem at the end of the day. And money only solves money problems. So once we can solve the math equation, then those problems essentially, become secondary or tertiary concerns, letting you continue to run your business and create the beautiful art and design and websites and NFTs that you do today. This is what that's for. And I got some good advice some years ago that encouraged me to give away my information for free. And so this is some of that. Okay, so jumping in, week number 1 out of our 9-week Building Better Business Finance course is really going to be focused on bookkeeping and your chart of accounts. Now, I probably lost 30% of you by jumping into bookkeeping and chart of accounts right away. But here's why. A good foundation for how you collect your financial data and operational data will make all the difference in the world. What you could do to really benefit yourself on the front end is hire a good bookkeeper. Shout out to all the bookkeepers out there, keeping everybody's books straight. This is wonderful. Without it, without good finances organized in an accounting system like QuickBooks or FreshBooks or others, really going to have a hard time making decisions predicated on data. So there's really kind of two organizations that are two ways to interact with data. When you're thinking about it from an organizational perspective, there are data informed businesses, and then there are data-driven businesses. What I like to work with is folks who are data informed, right? Because it allows us to still maintain a sense of feel and like context to the decisions that we're making, and it's not predicated solely on the numbers. However, you got to have those numbers right. So, what does that actually mean? When you open your books, or if you've got books right now and say you think they're messy right now, that's okay. These are all things that can be corrected over the course of time. But if you're just starting out, one of the things you can do when you open up your QuickBooks account or FreshBooks, what have you, is have a bookkeeper look over your shoulder to help you structure your chart of accounts. That chart of accounts is going to be the buckets that you put your expenses in as you incur them over time. So having them in the right place, having them ordered correctly will definitely help you when it comes time for tax season, but it'll also inform you on where am I spending my money, how much of my money am I spending in certain areas, and will really give you some deep insights as you begin to build your businesses. So that chart of accounts over the course of time becomes your profit and loss statement. And from my perspective, a good P&L is worth its weight in gold. Meaning, we can create budgets all the live long day, but if we don't know our actuals, like where we actually spend our cash, then budgeting going into the future is going to be difficult. So the structure of your budget, we're going to talk about in the next section, is going to mirror that of your profit and loss. So just by way of recap, hire a bookkeeper to help you structure your chart of accounts correctly. As time goes on, say the first 30 or 60 days of running your business, you're going to be putting expenses in those buckets, right, of your chart of accounts. When you go to report, or when you go to see where you have spent your money, that's going to be your profit and loss statement. Okay, there are other important financial statements, but a P&L when it comes to operating your business is crucial. What we're going to show you from Vitai's perspective is how to then build a budget off of that P&L so that you actually have two good pieces of information. You have, what did I budget for myself for a year? How do I break that down into quarters? And then what were my actuals, right, as we go through there. So, okay, so we can do all that in the first week. And if you're thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, that's a lot to do in the first week. It is, but it's really important information. And so it leads us up to week number 2. Financial planning and analysis, FP&A, that's insider lingo. This is probably an area that I'm most passionate about when it comes to helping small businesses. So one of the things I realized pretty early on was most entrepreneurs, small business owners, creative agencies have all the time in the world to work, for their business, but very little time to work on it. And a good FP&A dashboard really gives you the insights that you need in order to make the decisions going forward. So, long time ago, I read a quote by Mark Twain, and I don't really know a lot about Mark Twain, so don't cancel me for something I don't know about this guy, but he's credited with the saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And I think that's true of business finances as well. What you did last year, outside of major growth, hiring a bunch of new staff, taking on new expenses, is probably going to be pretty similar to what you did this year. So if you're thinking to yourself right now, man, I don't even know where to begin with a budget. Well, you do, because we have a good P&L, good profit and loss statement. That's already in the works, right? We've already created that. But 2, look at what you did last year. And let's begin to use that information to build out, okay, what can we anticipate going on this year? And that won't be the clearest picture, but it'll give you that rough sketch that you need financially to understand where I need to go from here from a sales perspective and where I may need to tighten up on my expenses and those types of things. So, okay. So since history rhymes, right, according to Mark Twain, and so do business finances, we're going to take that information and we're going to build our budget, right? Again, you can look in the very recent past at your profit and loss statement to help inform that. You can take maybe a quarter worth of information and project it over the year. You got to watch out for a few things, like when bills may come due that are significant sums, like insurance payments, where you might be making biannual payments, and so they're not quarterly installments or monthly installments. You got to watch out for the little caveats like that. But you can take that quarterly statement and begin to work those numbers and see what it's going to look like over the course of the year. And I'll show you an example here in just a minute. The 3 most important pieces of information that you're going to be wanting to watch is your top line, your bottom line, and your net profit margin. So let's talk about top line. Top line are your sales, right? Without cost of goods sold factored in or discounts given, right? Just what did you put out the door for your sales for that particular year? Now, one thing to remember is sales is not necessarily the same thing as what you've invoiced, right? So if you've sold something and you allowed your customer to spread out those payments over several months or a year, or you're 50% down at 50% upon completion, you have to understand that sometimes you may have booked sales, but they don't necessarily become invoices. So that top line revenue is most accurate when we look at it in the profit and loss statement inside your books, right? Because generally speaking, whatever's reflected in that number has been what you've invoiced, right? There's another bit of a caveat there that may not necessarily be what you've received when it comes to cash, right? From cash flow management perspective. So anyway, top line revenue, very important. Bottom line. What's our bottom line? Our bottom line is what's the total expenses that we have incurred in that month or that quarter or that year, whatever amount of time frame we're looking at. And then what's my net profit margin, right? For creative agencies, if you're like, man, I don't even know what I should be shooting at, I would recommend thinking about starting at 25% net profit margin. There's a real easy way to factor that in. We'll talk about that as we get a little deeper into this course. But 25% is a real good spot to start, especially in the services businesses. If you're in the product space, that can vary tremendously. You can have tremendous net profit margins on certain goods sold. But services, start at that 25% and then build off of there as time goes. Again, there's no harm, obviously, in increasing that. So that's week 2. Week number 3, how does this factor down into my operations plan? Well, one, operationally, you're going to want to update your QuickBooks or FreshBooks, whatever your accounting software is, at least monthly. If money is lean and you need more constant feedback, or you tend to delay updating your books, right? Taking those expenses and putting them into the buckets of the profit and loss statement that we created, which is your chart of accounts, then you're going to want to do it more often. Because again, that information of what you've actually spent is critical to understanding how healthy is your business operationally. We'll show you examples here of that in just a minute. Also, take those actuals and update your budget. So at Vitae, what we do is help folks keep that budget up to date once we get good, clean, month-end closed books for each of our customers. Now, as time goes on, you're going to be able to factor 3 very important metrics: burn rate, customer acquisition costs, and lifetime value. Burn rate. Okay, so burn rate is how much money does your business spend on average every single day. So if you think, and we're not going to do public math here, but if you think, all right, I spent $100,000 this month, right, which is a lot of money, but I'm just using that as a nice round number. I can either divide that by 30 days, right, for the month, or that's every calendar day. But if I want to divide it by how many work days it is, it's approximately 21.6 days or so. That's the difference between, am I just factoring my burn rate for each working day that my company exists, or every single calendar day? It's a little tighter, I mean better, a little bit more conservative, right, financially speaking, to divide it by how many working days there is, because that means that burn rate dollar amount will be higher. What does that inform you? Well, say at the end of that calculation, your burn rate is $2,000 a day. So you know that every single day your business needs to make $2,000 some way, somehow, right? All ethically and legally, of course, but $2,000 per day to just break even, right? You're not gaining any ground, you're not losing any ground, but you need to make $2,000 per day. If you want to make that 25% margin, right? Again, not doing public math, you take that $2,000 per working day times 1.25, right? That gives you that dollar amount now that your company needs to make in order to ensure that you're making a 25% margin. And I know that's a lot easier to say than to do. And you may be thinking, well, yeah, Will, like I need that to inform my pricing and I all on my invoicing and how regular that is. Of course. And we'll talk about those things a little bit later. But I just want to highlight to you that burn rate, especially for the folks that are in that $0 to $1 million annual revenue group, is super important to understand and keep an eye on. A part of that burn rate is customer acquisition costs, right? Also known as CAC. If you're in the marketing space, CAC is a key performance indicator or a metric that you're probably pretty familiar with. It's essentially, right, what is our sales costs and our marketing costs divided by, the number of customers that we have. Lifetime value is how much does our customer spend with us over the course of their purchasing life with us. The goal is to have essentially a 1 to 5 CAC to LTV ratio. So again, if it takes you $5 to acquire a customer, you want that customer to be doing $25 with you in lifetime value. One of the hacks in a good way, one of the things to watch out for is, man, how can I continue to increase the lifetime value of my customer? That will be potentially introducing new products or new services in to your business. Again, those are always your choice, but it's a lot easier to extend the LTV of a customer, again, staying core to your product offering and service offering, than it is to go out and get a new one, right? That just makes sense. And so anyways, especially in the SaaS world, a 1 to 5 CAC to LTV ratio is a healthy ratio to have. We'll show you a little bit more on how to calculate those. Productizing goods and services. This is at next level, right? So if you've been in business for a while and you're a service-based industry first, especially for those in the creative field, you might want to think about productizing your services. And so what do I mean by that? So in my experience, especially as folks are just getting started, they're offering lots of services to, lots of different customers, and it seems boutique. It seems a la carte. It seems like there's just a buffet of things that you can do, and for $1, you will do those things, right? But as time goes on, that array, that grouping continues to grow and grow and grow. And what might be helpful to you if you feel like, man, we will do everything from an event to, helping someone with, flyers to a logo to a website and on, is to productize it. Meaning, what's the core of what you want to offer? What's the core of what your customers purchase from you? And how can you set those up into packages that lend one to another? Meaning, if you have a package 1, right, that's got a few different services that you do, and you have it correctly priced, then how does that lead into those folks buying package number 2, right? Therefore, increasing your lifetime value. And I'll show you a couple of examples of those as we go. But I want you to hold that idea as a placeholder of, asking yourself, the question of, what value would it be to our agency if we took the ad hoc grouping of things that we do and begin to productize them, begin to systematize them into packages. Same idea with goods, right? If you're thinking about goods, physical goods that you offer, is there ways that you can package them or productize them that actually increases the lifetime value of each one of your customers? So again, we'll talk more about that in the very near future. So that was week 4. Week 5 to 6 is all about forecasting. So in forecasting, we're coming back to the budget, and we're going to start talking about sales. I listened to a lot of different podcasts, so I'm not really sure where I heard this, but it might have been Gary Vee maybe. But new sales solves all problems. And I know that's an overgeneralization, but it's so critically important, right? Every one of you knows. Take a Warren Buffett quote, cash is oxygen, right? Sales is the generator of that cash. And when we think about sales, one real important tenet is to not let your eyes be bigger than your stomach. Or another way of saying it is, don't try to make your business do something that it's not currently built to do. So if you did $1 in sales last year and you did $2 in sales this year, oversimplifying the numbers, that's 100% growth, right? Can you anticipate doing 100% growth if you did $1 million last year and $2 million this year when you look into the future to do yet another 100% growth? That's what I mean when I say Don't try to make your business do something it wasn't built to do. You can always build it better. You can always build it bigger. You can always build it stronger. Um, but it matters to know what revenue is coming in and how it's coming in and how that's affecting your overall business. So, two big pieces that I think any business can look at, regardless of their growth or shrink over the last year, is to look at, you know, what is the seasonality of my business, if there is one. If you've been in business long enough to understand that, yeah, a lot of your folks do sales with you in the first quarter or in the fourth quarter of a year, right? The first 3 months or the last 4 months of a calendar year, then you can adjust for seasonality and you can set the targets for your sales team, whether that's one person or 5 people, to go after that target of seasonality. One thing that everybody can do, though, is to shoot for quarterly sales targets that are actually that 25%. So if you're doing $1 million in sales, that's your goal for the year. Then for each quarter, your goal is $250,000. The only drawback to just having quarterly targets, meaning just 25%, is you have to watch your expenses, because your expenses may creep up faster on you than that 25%, and you'll run lean from a cash flow perspective, and that won't be good. So it's contextual to the business, but those are two ways that you can think about sales when we think about forecasting out into the future, and what are we, what targets are we going after? Some ratios that matter, especially when you're trying to assess health. I picked this up from the software as a service or SaaS world, is the rule of 40. And that rule of 40 is your growth rate percentage plus your profitability should equal or be greater than 40%. So again, for oversimplistic math, if your growth rate is 20%, right, regardless of the amount of time that you're looking at, and in that same time your profitability is 20%, then you've exceeded, or you've met the minimum threshold of that rule of 40, right? So that is a ratio that matters. Another one that matters, and obviously you want to go higher than that if you can. Another ratio that matters is that CAC to LTV. I think Alex Ramosi said it well. Your enterprise value is essentially, your lifetime value minus your CAC divided by however many customers you have. And I think that's a really good acid test of the health of a business. And again, if you want to have a hard number to hold on to, a minimum of 5-to-1, which we talked about in a couple of sections ago, 5-to-1 LTV to CAC ratio is a good initial ratio to shoot after. And then bricks in the wall. What do I mean by that? So when it comes to hiring staff or contractors, if you think about how a brick mason, a bricklayer, brick mason, just bricklayer or mason, confuse those words. If you think about, imagine them building a wall, right? There is courses to how they build. There's also a system to how they build, and everything is perfectly level. It's really a beautiful thing to watch if you ever get the chance to. One of the offices that I've had in the past, I got to watch a team of bricklayers face a theater, and over the course of time, began to see them, how they approach that, and it was beautiful arches and that sort of thing. Here's my point. You don't start on one side of a building and lay completely across to the other side and then up one course and then back across, right, to the left. Thinking about right to left. There is a lot of times, some side will get built out a little higher than another, and then they'll balance it, and they'll go like that. Okay, so when you think about staffing contractors, what is the best way to build out that team, right? And so if you just had a bunch of sales folks and nobody in fulfillment, whether that's in the product or in the services, then you'll get a lot of sales, but you have a lot unhappy customers because you won't be able to deliver them what they've purchased. Um, Similarly, if you have a lot of folks in fulfillment but nobody in sales, your burn rate is going to go through the roof, and you're not going to have new sales to feed the folks uh, their paychecks. Additionally, if you have good sales and good fulfillment, but you have forsaken the operations team, um, it begins to weigh on um, how work is getting done and the quality of the office and the culture. And so it really is a balancing act of all three of those, whether we're talking about administration, or we're talking about folks in fulfillment, right, or we're talking about sales. And then there's obviously sales and HR and other leadership positions to help those folks do work and execute work better and more productively. So we'll talk more about that in the future. So already on to week 7, which is great. This is reporting. One of the things that I really like to do, and Google Sheets, right? When we think about tools, there's lots of different tools out there. I like Google Sheets. There is some limited functionality as opposed to like Excel, but I like Google Sheets because it's all in the cloud. It's all on servers, and you can begin to build out a financial dashboard that will do a lot of this reporting for you, especially if you're trying to measure where you are against your budget for the year. 3 big areas that I recommend folks keep a constant eye on is what percent of the year has transpired, what percent of sales has been obtained, and where are we at on our percent of expenses against our budget for the year. And that's a little bit of a mouthful, but you're really measuring 2 things. One, what has happened, right? So what percent against our target have we met? And then where are we at in terms of relationship to the end of the year? So if you've spent, say, 1 quarter has transpired, so that's 25% of the year, and you have spent 17% of your budget, that's a really good thing, right? Assuming that you're not going to have some major expenses coming down the road. But again, your budget should account for that. That means that you're trailing the calendar year by that difference, right? So if you've spent 17% of your budget, but only 25% of the year has transpired, right? 8% is the delta or the difference in a good way, right? You're not ahead of where you're supposed to be for that time of the year. There's some real nice, easy calculations inside of Google Sheets that you can do. And again, because it's in the cloud, if you're tracking where we at year to date, it actually automates that for you, and it's really simple. So you can build charts and graphs inside of Google Sheets, and then copy and paste those onto a Google Doc, which is what I do. Again, it's very low tech. It's very inexpensive. You're not necessarily paying for additional softwares, because this comes with your Google Suite, and it just makes life pretty easy. And it's pretty clean, and it gives you the information that you need, and that saves you money to be able to invest into your company in other areas, as opposed to spending on software that you may or may not need. Okay, so then we're going to come back to also burn rate and net profit margin. Again, 2 other big measures of health: your burn rate and your net profitability. So why both? Well, here's why. Burn rate, because that's always going to affect how you think about pricing. When you establish your budget at the beginning of the year, right, all the way back into week number 2, you had a annualized budgeted burn rate number, meaning, there's 261 working days in the US, right? Calendar, Monday through Friday kind of days. I know folks hustle on the weekends and Saturdays, but I'm just talking about Monday through Friday, right? The traditional classic American work week. That you have about 261 days in each calendar year, right? And so if you took your total expenses divided by that 261, you had your annualized burn rate, right? It's budgeted. It's not your actuals. Actuals come later. but it gives you a idea of how should we price ourselves going forward. Now then it's all about control. It's all about controlling your expenses so that you don't exceed that. But sometimes the growth of the business, you have such good product market fit that you do want to increase your expenses. You do want to hire additional staff, right? Um, this session is being recorded in a time where the job market is extremely hot. Um, Lots of employers are looking for new workers, right? And so this might be an opportunity where like you had the opportunity to hire some really great staff and you want to increase your spend, aka increase your burn rate. The one thing though that you'll want to always keep an eye on, in addition to all the other things I've said, you always want to keep an eye on is your net profit margin, right? What percent are you able to hold um, in cash for that day? Now, again, this video is being recorded during a time where inflation is moving very rapidly. And so what you do with that cash matters. I would make the recommendation to always have at least, at minimum, 3 to 6 months of liquidity on hand. I know that hurts the business a little bit, but if you're bootstrapping your business, aka you're spending money on it yourself, to have that safety net of at least 3 to 6 months of liquidity is very important. I've read reports, especially during the last major downturn when it came to airlines. I think Southwest Airlines, I think this was a Wall Street Journal article, had like 27 months of cash on hand. So again, it doesn't hurt you, right? But you are always wanting to have a balancing act between how much cash we're keeping on hand and how much of that are we reinvesting back into the company. The first to market with the product or services that your customer wants, it matters, right? So this is always a judgment call, but you're never going to go wrong having some cash on hand and at least 3 to 6 months worth if you can get there, right? And you can, because you're budgeting for it, you're planning for it, you're setting goals out there of what your net profit is. It's really just a matter of how quickly you get there. Week 8. Okay, so now you have a lot of really important information. Again, we're going to come back to the idea of the financial dashboard. These are just the metrics that you're going to use in your business to help you keep track of what's happening in there. VTI is always around. We're going to keep giving additional information for y'all to have. What I compare this to is getting your blood drawn. And I know for the folks out there that are squeamish, sorry for bringing this up, but folks, phlebotomists draw labs that get sent to the lab, and then certain numerical values return back about your high density lipids, levels, your low density lipids, right? Your essentially cholesterol, other things about pH and arterial gas and different things about that. You give that to someone who doesn't know what they're looking at. They don't know if those numbers are good or poor. And so what we're going to continue to do here at Vita is give you additional information on how to read those numbers that you've done so much work on already to measure, right? And again, going back to the last week where we talked about creating good graphs based on good information, based on the fact that you have a good P&L because you hired a bookkeeper all the way back into week 1, right, is going to give you that information to build that financial dashboard. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like here later. So those are your metrics. Those are your current up-to-date. Here's what's happening. That doesn't project all things when it comes to financial health or business health, right? It's really just a snapshot in time. And again, these are lagging indicators, right? So these are things that have happened historically. When we think about going into the future, there are leading indicators that we can pull together, like customer sentiment, like net promoter score, right? Is another way of saying that, measuring how likely your customers are to refer your business to others. That's a leading indicator. Also, a good way to balance some of these financials is what's the vision of our company, right? Where do we want to go? How do we want to build this? There's really no right way to build out a company. There's a lot to be said for, running a business that you like, right? Another Gary Vee quote for you there. And I think that's true. Um, some folks want a business that's just going to cash flow well, so it pays for their lifestyle. That's amazing. Vitae for a long time was a hobby. They cash flowed, and that's what I liked about it. Other folks are about building something much, much, much bigger, right? Those are, as I've heard the folks at ConnectWise say, those are the empire builders, right? It doesn't mean that you have to be one or the other. It means that you have to have a sense of internally, are we making progress against the vision that we set out for when we first started this thing? And then, of course, market conditions. So we're recording this video in a time where lots of dynamic volatility in the market, and I think that's broader, world market as well as closer to home. And so something you always have to keep your eye on is what's happening in my industry, what's happening in my business as it relates to my industry. Where do I need to move to continue to serve my customer? What got us here isn't necessarily what's going to keep us here. So these three pieces, I think, are three good cornerstones. I guess there's only one cornerstone, but three good pieces of a foundation for informed decision making. You go all the way back to week one when we talked about, there's two different, schools of thought. There's data informed and there's data driven, right? This is an area where you can take that data informed amount of information and roll that into, okay, but how is this affecting our vision and what's happening around us? Again, good solvent decision making, is super important for your business. And then week 9. And obviously this isn't the last thing that we all have to do, but for the sake of this video, this is the last week, because I made it 9 weeks, but building scale. And scale, and we talked about in the last section, is up to you, right? What kind of business are you running? Are you bootstrapped, right? Are you providing the financing yourself? Are you holding all the equity or most of the equity so that you can continue to do the thing that you so enjoy doing? Or are you rocket strapped? That's not a word. I just wanted to compare it to bootstrap. Rocket strap, what I mean by that is, are you taking on capital from a venture capital firm or some other investor group or debt, right? At some level where you might be selling off a percent of your business in order to get cash to be able to, attain growth faster, whether that's growth of employees or growth, of your customer base. Again, they're not a right or wrong way here, but as you build scale, whether you're paying for it yourself or you're having an investor group help, deploy capital to you for those functions, it's going to matter. It's going to matter how you build scale, right? When it comes to those things, bootstrap is going to be a little slower. That's the drawback potentially, right? But the upside is you're holding on to the equity of your business. So if you do find yourself to be a unicorn of a business, that's a really good thing, right? Because you're going to hold all that equity, as opposed to, selling it off, which again is fine too, right? But there's just difference, right? As we think about building scale. Another key component we haven't talked a lot about, but might make additional content on this later, is culture, right? What's the culture of your business as you begin to scale? Defining that culture is a very valuable exercise. And the three pieces that a lot of folks, focus on when they talk about defining, qualifying what their culture is what's our mission, what's our vision, and what are our values. I would like to throw out a recommendation there that, assigning or determining those values is maybe the most important of those three. Again, I'd love to hear feedback from the rest of y'all if there is a greater than of those three. But I've led companies where, or a company where we really focused in on the values first. And that was super helpful because it helped clarify then the mission and the vision as it went on. And then the end game. Obviously, this is not the end of the game. Business is a perpetual game. I really like it that for that reason. But this is more of a question positing what is your end game? What are you trying to accomplish with this business? You have decided to dedicate your life to it, many days or years of your life to it. What do you want it to be for you, for maybe even your family or your employees, right? What's the end game? Because I think as we think about the largest vision, right, or the most macro view, what are we trying to build this business towards, and what do we want to have come of it? So, again, asking yourself those questions, which they'll change over time. It has for me, it has for folks that I've worked with, and that's totally okay. But to ask yourself the question is really where the value is. So you know what trajectory feels good to you as you're building out your business. So that's it. That's your 9 weeks to building better business finances. This has been more the street guide to how to do that. And again, cursory overview. Would love to get some of y'all's comments on what you thought about it. What would be interesting to you for me to dive deeper into. And so anyway, hope this brought you some value. Thanks for taking some time to watch it, and we'll see you next time.